Bet on Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way. Oof. That's the takeaway from yesterday. Oof. As we heard Kevin Warren, Ryan Poles, and Thomas Brown at the podium. Courtney Cronin, of course, was in the building with all three of them. Got to ask some very poignant questions and got to be there for the dare I say, one of the most awkward pauses in Chicago Bears history. If we're making history out here, got to break all that down and more on today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave the 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. It's a little cold out there, Courtney, but it's Chicago warm. I said today, how are you doing? Because I went outside in a t-shirt and sweats, and I was like, it's not bad.
That's a poor choice on your part. But again, like we're so conditioned to it where I do the whole thing where I'll wear slides to like go to Walgreens to pick up something and be like, it's 5 degrees out. Just be that I'm in the car. I'm only going to be walking a couple feet outside of the car after I park. So like, that's how I justify it. So I make poor choices too. I think we all do because we have to deal with this for the next 4 months, but I'm good. I think that the last couple of days have been pretty eye-opening just in terms of where the franchise is right now. Like 5 games left, things that are happening within the team and then outside of the team. I mean, let's not forget, I think what they're trying to avoid right now is this week feeling like it did when they were going into the Green Bay game, when they fired Shane Waldron, and that was the entire talk up until Friday. And before that, when they were going into Arizona, where the Hail Mary was the talk the entire freaking week. Ryan Poles made it a point at the end of his press conference yesterday to say, it's time to turn attention to San Francisco and to handle everything that's gone on, put a big old bow on it over the last, those 72 hours from the time that Eberflus was fired till we get to Sunday. And then we find out there's a press conference and the team's brass and Thomas Brown addresses kind of where they are going forward. Like the San Francisco game is a big one. Not just because it's Thomas Brown's first opportunity as the head coach, but look how injured they are. The injury news that keeps coming out from the Bay Area about this team and where the Bears might actually, if we'll find out if they really are as close as we think they are, or if it's truly a Matt Eberflus byproduct that was holding them back, if they can go into San Francisco and win this game. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself. We want to talk about Thomas Brown. We want to talk about what we learned from Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles. But I keep thinking back to that, just they have a legit shot here on the road after 3 division losses where they lost by 7 points. And I think it just further emphasizes why they made this change, where they now have a 5-game sample size to see the strength of the roster, to evaluate what they want out of their next head coach, if that guy is currently the interim or if he's somebody that's outside of the building, and seeing where they can go from there. But right now they're laying the bricks to be able to create that path to walk on, which 6 weeks from now, its search is going to be starting up in full force, and it's going to come here sooner than you know it. Yeah.
I mean, listen, I left yesterday with 2 feelings, and neither of them, I don't know, one of them may be a good feeling in a sense. I don't know how I feel about this one yet, but Kevin Warren's in charge. That was the number one thing I left yesterday with, even with George McCaskey sitting in there on the side. And listen, I know he's the owner of the team, but it felt like that entire group of people was in the principal's office for hiring Matt Eberflus in the first place. It looked like that on Ryan Poles' face. I thought that George was just over there yeah, it is what it is. Here we go. We're doing this again. At least we got Kevin Warren here. The other feeling I had, and this is the one that makes me feel the worst, is when I saw the look on Ryan Poles' face, and yes, you did the right thing at the end of the day, and we know he gets very attached to the people in that building. That's what makes him a good GM. But I literally was just I could see us sitting here introducing a new GM in a year and a half, 2 years, because things don't go right. It's a bad feeling to get from the presser, but it felt like there was a shift in power that I don't know if everybody in that building is on board with, and Kevin Warren is the one who's sitting on top.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And the biggest takeaway that I have is what my phone looks like this morning of how many texts I've gotten from people around the league asking about Ryan Poles and the body language and what his looking miserable. And the thing is, you can't, it's optics are everything. And I think he knows that. He's been in the league for a very long time. He's been a general manager now for 2.5+ seasons. He gets it. And I'm sure that that's probably something that he wishes he could do differently. And it's, it's hard. Like, I come on here without makeup. Do I look like I'm having a great time right now? No, I look fucking exhausted, Pat, but like, I'm having a great time just because my face doesn't look like it, because I'm fatigued, I'm chronically dehydrated, and I don't look like I'm about to look when I go on Around the Horn in a couple hours, doesn't accurately display how I'm feeling. I love doing this show with you. Same thing with Ryan Poles. I think he just has a hard time, like, not necessarily hiding emotion, but just kind of like the blank face. Kevin Warren sat there and opened up the press conference and talked for a really long time. So what's Ryan Poles supposed to do? Sit there and like be a yes, like a bobblehead, and like start not like, I think people need to chill on that aspect a little bit. Like, one thing I got a text about today was, funny, because like somebody took a screenshot of it and sent it to me. It was like, the caption underneath it was, if one of us is wearing suits, we're both wearing suits. I think that just like optics, optically speaking, if that's even a word, that's probably how they should have handled it, because it does speak to where the power lies in the balance, or maybe even imbalance of power, that Kevin Warren, the team president and CEO, is the front-facing member in that press conference, the one who had like the most dominant voice, was answering the questions, let us know about Ryan Poles' job security. Wasn't like Ryan Poles came out there and said, yeah, I'm staying, I'm good, I have the assurance of of ownership for that. It was Kevin Warren prefacing before Ryan Poles could even speak that Poles remains the general manager and he will be the point person on the head coaching search. But the way that press conference in about 21 minutes was handled kind of shows you who has the real juice here. And that's not to say that Ryan Poles does not. I just think that the dynamic, the very delicate dynamic, that like it takes a long time to understand, that you've got to have conversations with people who understand how Kevin Warren operates and how Ryan Poles operates. Yeah. I think that Poles has done a really good job insulating himself from some of the decisions that he's made. And maybe his loyalty did get the better of him. He did come in with Matt Eberflus. I think those are fair questions to bring up that were asked of Kevin Warren yesterday about Ryan Poles' role in this situation. He's not off, like he's not getting off scot-free. He oversaw an offensive coordinator search that ended with Shane Waldron getting fired after 9 games. He decided to stick with Matt Eberflus last year. And I mean, I've talked with people in the building. There were calls for Kevin Warren to make a change at head coach last year, to step in and do that. And obviously he put the trust in his general manager. We heard Poles say that himself, that George and Kevin in January signed off on him keeping Matt Eberflus. But regardless of that happening, you still got to sit in it. You still got to own it. That's still on you as a general manager. So I think just given that, he's self-aware enough to know that somebody else is also going to be a part of this head coaching search. He got it wrong the first time. And I know we've talked about this, like who actually hired Matt Eberflus. Yeah. Paul was it at the end of the day. That's ancient history. It doesn't need to, it's a topic for another day. But I'm not surprised at the way that it was handled yesterday, just based on the window that they have right now, that they absolutely have to have a home run hire instead of the safe hire, which was made last time, and that it's going to take them big guns, more or less, to come in and make that happen, which is how Kevin Warren, I think, kind of is viewed in this whole thing, as being like, the ultimate decision maker, even though it took him a minute to kind of come back to this. Like, if they're dissenting voices, that was how the question was phrased, that it would ultimately be Ryan Poles' call. The way that press conference, the vibe that press conference put off yesterday was that it may be Ryan Poles' call in theory, and it might be at the end of the day, but you could tell who really carries a lot of weight, just in terms of the dynamic. Remember, he's Ryan Poles' boss. Yeah. He's over football operations as much as he is over the business side of the organization.
And listen, Court, I'll go to you because a lot of times we're locked in on the teams that we're in, but you've been a part of other organizations, covering them and different things, where you get to see how football is probably supposed to be done more times than not. Is this just normal and Bears fans aren't used to it? Is the power of the president the normal thing and Bears fans aren't used to it? Because the president that we've had has always been very tucked off in the corner. We don't speak on it. Usually anytime Ted got involved, we look back on it and go, oh, you mean you had a chance to go out and get one of the greatest coaches of all time and you said no? Okay, that's a problem. You mean you could have got the star quarterback, but you vetoed the trade? All right, we need you to stay out of Bears business. Like those are the moments for Bears fans where they look at the president. Is this just how the rest of the league is done?
No.
And we're just not used to it.
No, I will say that. No, it's not standard operating procedure for a team president to be this visible. And I'll go back to his previous stop in the NFL, which was Minnesota. So the way that the structure was there, the Wilfs, both Ziggy and Mark, were at the very top, the owners of the team. When Kevin Warren was there and he was the president of the operation, I don't know the exact title, but he was the president of the team. There's some executive VP, blah, 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 blah title, but I think he was the president of the team. He was over business. He stayed on this side of the building. Literally, there were divisions in the building that made it very clear who was on what side and who was on the other side. Over here was Rick Spielman, the king of football. Let's call it that. So you got the king of football, the king of the business side. I don't know why I'm using these sort of terms, but it just helps me understand it. Yeah. And he was over the football side of everything as the general manager. And the two of them reported to the very top, but they didn't really intersect, or where there was intersection, like the time that Adrian Peterson was put on the commissioner's exempt list, it's because Kevin Warren had to step in and do that over the general manager, who was Rick Spielman. It wasn't good. And so it's even now, could you tell me off the top of your head who the president of the Minnesota Vikings is? You could tell me Kevin O'Connell's the head coach. Can you tell me that general manager of the Minnesota Vikings? Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. I'm not even trying to stump you. I'm just trying to prove a point here. Andrew Miller is the person that was successor to Kevin Warren. He was hired after Kevin Warren went to the Big Ten. The general NFL fan, I can't tell you a lot of teams' presidents. I'd have to look that stuff up. I just know that because I covered the team and I was there. He doesn't get involved in football stuff. It's a very different structure here where Kevin Warren is over both of these things. And that was different from even when Ted Phillips was the president of this organization. First and foremost, Kevin Warren's the first outside voice, outside person, outside the family. Because Ted Phillips, yes, he's not a McCaskey, but he's family. He was with the organization for 40 years. Right. So when Kevin Warren came in and was able to, structure this to a degree of how he wanted, how he thought this would be the best fit for the organization, putting him over football operations. I remember the day he was hired, the press release that the Bears put out when it said that he would be over football operations too. That was the second sentence in that press release. And that was the biggest thing to me, because that means he's Ryan Pohl's boss. He's the boss over the coaches, over the GM, over everybody in the front office. Ultimately, that's a different structure than most NFL teams abide by. So that being said, how is that going to affect this head coaching search? Because I feel that's going to create a completely different experience than how this thing went the last time around and how we typically see these things done across the NFL.
Right. It's going to be interesting. I think what really stands out in this entire dynamic is just the fact that when Kevin Warren said Ryan Poles is going to be leading the way, and then 2 seconds later said it's going to be a collaborative effort. While, yes, collaborating means that you're working together on something, I thought it was very poignant when asked, hey, but who's got the final say? Somebody's got to say yes or no. And he goes, well, it's going to be a collaborative effort. That to me means, listen, if I don't like the guy, if I'm not in on the guy, he's not going to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. That does scare me a little bit. But the one point that I made about Kevin Warren on the Morning Breeze this morning, that I thought maybe this is why this is the positive spin on it. Maybe this is why it's good having Kevin Warren in the building. We've seen Ryan Poles maybe have emotional reactions with certain players, have emotional reactions with the coaching staff in the building and in different moments. And he said as much, where he's like, yeah, there are times where Ian has to pull me back and say, we're not going to do this right now. We're going to do things differently, blah, blah, blah. That's why you have those people in the building. We've seen the McCaskies operate off of emotions for 30 plus years now. Kevin Warren is about his business. And maybe having that voice in the room is what you finally need to lead you to the right direction. Because, Courtney, while I love everything I heard from Thomas Brown in the press conference, for everything that the Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren presser lacked, Thomas Brown made up for it tenfold with how he came out. Clearly the buzzword in that locker room is accountability. He talked about accountability, coachability, dependability. Like, you love all of those things, but it comes down to wins.
Sure.
And in true McCaskey fashion, if Thomas Brown went out there, he goes 3-2, still loses to the Packers, finds a way to beat the 49ers, finds a way to beat, the Vikings and beats the Seahawks. I could see them going, well, he went 3-2. He got us to 7-10. It was a tough season. He was up and down. We're going to stick with him moving forward no matter what. I don't think that Kevin Warren's the kind of guy to say, yeah, that was good enough. Let's just roll with that. It seems like he would be the business voice in the building that would say, I understand the emotional attachment here, but we need to go out and get somebody better than him, because we're not doing this again in 3 years.
Well, and I think that there's, the front office, the ownership, they all think very highly of Thomas Brown. Like, think about how much more, it's kind of the old adage, like, the better you are at your job, the more responsibility that you get added onto your plate. Very clearly, they feel like he can handle it, which is why he's the interim head coach. Why, they went through a number of different contingency plans to figure out, like, what's the best way to go about this when Flus gets fired. Could there have been somebody else? Yeah, absolutely. There's other options if you wanted to, like, just let Thomas Brown focus on Caleb Williams and, going about it that way, which I think is a very rational way to go about it, considering he just became the OC 3 weeks ago. However, I do, like, and I reported this morning, and I did like a inside the firing of Matt Eberflus. It's up at ESPN.com. It's a TikTok, which is what we call not the video, but like kind of like a minute by minute thing of like how this whole thing transpired. And, with Thomas Brown in this situation now, as they start to form their search committee, I don't know if they're actually going to use a search firm, but like they're going to form, it's not just Kevin Warren, Ryan Poles, George McCaskey, contrary to popular belief. Like, it's not 3 people picking the head coach. There are people from the business side. There's former players who are involved in this. There's trusted advisors that end up being part of these meetings. You need to make sure that you have vetted every single candidate and doing it pretty thoroughly, which is why it's not just the job of 3 people alone. So what does that mean for Thomas Brown? Like, the Bears are planning, like, obviously, like, everything matters on what happens in the next 5 games. They can't, like, look awful, because then it's an obvious decision of, okay, well, no, they're not going to interview him. But like, if the 3-2 scenario plays out, if they're 2-3, if Caleb continues to grow, they're going to have every reason, win-loss record aside from like a complete disaster, which they don't think is going to happen. They wouldn't have put him in that situation.
No, I agree with that.
But like, barring a complete disaster, he'll be part of the interview mix next year. And he should be, because and I know it may not be, to some Bears fans who hear that right now, they're thinking, oh no, that means they're going to pass up on Ben Johnson or Cliff Kingsbury or, Mike Vrabel or some of the other hot names right there. That's not the case at all. They're going to interview multiple people to make sure that they have a wide pool. That's like Ryan Poles said, they're going to cast a wide net. You can't say that and then not do it. Like, that's just, and if Thomas Brown ends up being the guy, great. Then you have a young up-and-comer who will be 39 next season as your head coach, who clearly did enough in a short amount of time to connect with this team and get success out of this team, that it should lead you to believe that in the future it'll be the right move. But I don't think that means, like, if they're successful by whatever their metric is these next 5 games, that they're not going to want to interview like the big names out there. I know for a fact that they want to, and they're going to, because you have to be thorough with this. As Kevin Warren said yesterday, it's hard to think about it, but these are decisions that affect you 10, 15, 20 years down the line. You don't want to set your franchise back, and, they've got to quicken up or, hurry up on that timeline to a degree, because think about Matt Eberflus. They're lucky that they were able to do the rebuild and the teardown, and they really weren't derailed by the Eberflus stuff outside of this year. Like, this is a year they were supposed to get, they're supposed to be in contention this year. Yeah. And they had the roster too. When you can pluck out one thing, being the head coach, and not see, like, the thing metastasize in like other areas and be like, oh no, now we got to handle this. So like, you can just contain it to the head coach was the problem, then you can put somebody else in there next year and realize that the roster and like the plan to get into contention is not that far off. And that's how they view it inside Hallis Hall, which is why they made the change when they did. But it's this whole process is going to be really interesting to see like how quickly they go about it when the season ends. And, some of the candidates they're going to be interviewing are going to be hot names somewhere else. So how long they have to wait. And if Chicago really is, which we all believe because of the quarterback specifically, the best coaching destination for any coach this offseason, then it might take a minute because they're going to want to go through and get as many candidates as they can in. And maybe it's the first job announced because it is the most attractive to when they get their top choice, they can go ahead and say, all right, we're done. We're ready to go on this. But we'll have to see how that plays out. And Kevin Warren, Ryan Poles dynamic, and that is going to be an interesting one to track.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Is there a situation that can happen this season? Because Thomas Brown, I mean, listen, he speaks the part. From what we've seen of him as an OC, I love what the guy has done for Caleb Williams over the last few weeks, right? I mean, talk about having probably the greatest month in football history. The 2 promotions in a month is
like
impressive.
In 17 days. I don't know if that's a good thing. I mean, yes, in a way it is, but it's also like things had to go really poorly for that to happen for him.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Elsewhere.
But is there a scenario that could finish out this season where there's a clear-cut answer that Thomas Brown's the guy in your mind, and at the end of this season, we're not talking about moving on and going to get Ben Johnson or, throw whatever big name guy, Joe Brady out there where you're like, no, we've got our guy. He's in the building right now. We're moving forward. And it doesn't feel like that Antonio Pierce situation.
No, I do not think that there is a clear-cut scenario that it's like seen enough by everybody else. Like it's Thomas Brown. I really do think that they're not looking at this as an audition because it's so unfair to Thomas Brown. Like you just mentioned, 2 promotions in 17 days. He's not running his offense. He's trying to keep his hand over all the different things that are going to pop up and just get this team to the finish line of the season. There's a lot of good that can be discovered about him in this interim head coaching role the next 5 games, but there's not a scenario, in my opinion, where they'd be like, yep, seen enough. We're moving forward with Thomas Brown. Now, could what happens these next 5 games put him to the top of their list? Sure. If they go 3-2, and if Caleb continues on this path where you go to the end of the season, it's locker cleanout day, players are doing exit interviews, and you're like, man, that feels good. That feels different because we're not having the same questions with him that we did with Justin at the end of these things where it's like, I don't know, giant question mark. If they, and I know they do feel highly about Caleb, they're not, the fact that your quarterback will not be the biggest question that you have to address in the offseason, number one, is a big deal. But if they feel like, oh man, we really lucked into this pairing right here, we got to find a way to keep it, then that gives them something to think about as they go into the offseason of what can Thomas Brown, is it a better option to not put Caleb onto his 3rd offensive coordinator and play caller by his 18th game in the NFL? Or do they want to continue? Are there better options somewhere else by bringing in a bigger name, somebody that maybe they had their eye on, or maybe even pairing Caleb back up with somebody that he's worked with before, like a Cliff Kingsbury? But I don't think it's fair to say that there would be a scenario where if Thomas Brown does XYZ the next 5 games, that it's a wrap and it's his job.
That's interesting because I don't think it's going to happen. Now, here's the thing. I hope the guy goes out and gets all the wins in the world. But I feel like the optics of you've seen 3 weeks of Thomas Brown working well with Caleb. If you find a way to win 4 of your next 5, that's a tough guy to move on from. Now, I do agree. You should. This should just be the audition to get you a conversation, like you said, that puts you at the top of the list. But I feel like the top of the list for this Bears team, especially on a young new coach, a young coordinator trying to make his name as a head coach, I wonder if that would be the thing that locks it in. But like I said before, maybe Kevin Warren coming in, being the business mind that he is, says, no, we're still going to do our due diligence. That's the only way. That's the only path forward.
They have to, because then otherwise you could poke holes in the search and be like, man, they took the easy way out, or they didn't do a thorough search. Things are going to be different with this Bears search. All the stuff that happened the last time around, or really the last couple of times around, maybe even forever, the stuff about them flying people in economy. like I have it on good authority that that's never going to happen again. And sometimes that just has to do with like the way that they've been doing things. And it wasn't like a malicious or a cheap intent to be like, oh, we're flying Dan Quinn on like Economy Plus. But like they're trying to do things in a first class manner. And you've got to at least give them the benefit of the doubt to show you that they can do it. So all of that said, it's not fair to judge them right now on what you think will play out with the head coaching search. Let them get there first. Let Thomas Brown coach these 5 games. Let's figure out, is it the right fit right now? Do you like things where they are? If you don't, then it's an easy answer of, okay, that's great. Like he was the best answer for the short term, move on at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But if there's something there, you can't ignore it just out of the sake of, oh, well, we don't want to look like we like shortchange the search. Like you might have, the next best thing that at head coach. And it's the endorsements he gets from like former players
around the league. He is beloved.
Yeah. Like I'm writing a story right now on him. And I, had a conversation with DJ Dallas, who was his player in Miami when he was at the U, and like transitioned him from wide receiver to running back. And just some of the things he was talking about, he's in the Cardinals now. So some of the things he was talking about, just how like it's time for a change in the NFL. And he was like comparing like, kind of like the old guard going out to like this new wave of coaches. And he was comparing Thomas Brown to Jonathan Gannon, who's a young 30-something-year-old coach for the Arizona Cardinals, who's their head coach. Like if he's being put, like if he's in the mind of some players, we need to address this. Caleb Williams is not going to be making the call on the head coach. I do think Ryan Poles addressed that, saying he's like, I don't know about significant input, but of course, like you better come correct with a plan for like how you're going to develop the quarterback. Frankly, I think Caleb's too young, like to have that big of a say in this. I remember, like, it's not Aaron Rodgers picking Nathaniel Hackett, which obviously is like, the wrong call, and those sorts of things, like, or rather, like the Denver Broncos picking Nathaniel Hackett because they thought that's who Aaron Rodgers wanted, and it doesn't end up working out that way, et cetera, et cetera. Like Caleb's got enough to worry about, but the Bears have to pick somebody that they believe will be able to get the most out of Caleb, but like the endorsements that Thomas Brown gets from these players and just like the way that people speak of him, that can't hurt you at the end of the day, regardless of what happens the rest of the season. That can only kind of add value to your overall resume and body of work that should be able to help you when he gets into these interview scenarios, because opportunities rather, because he's going to get more than one. I promise you. It won't just be the Chicago Bears. He interviewed for a head coaching opportunity with the Titans last year.
Yeah.
He will have more than the Bears knocking on his door this year, which is something the Bears have to factor in too. Do you want to let this guy out of the building to potentially have to coach against him if he gets hired somewhere else as a head coach?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing that I think of, right? If you see it working, if you see it actually doing something, again, like you said, there has to be a plan in place. For me, I think 5-0 gets you the top conversation heading into next offseason, and maybe put you above some coordinators that people would have you buried under right now. But realistically speaking, I do wonder, the Caleb Williams aspect of this. If Caleb is comfortable, do you take that away from him in a season where this has to be one of the most uncomfortable rookie seasons we've ever seen as far as the quarterback position? I'm not just talking about getting hit. Oh, by the way, he did that too. He's been the most sacked quarterback in the NFL, but he's, I guess, in title alone, he's now on his 3rd offensive coordinator, even though Thomas Brown is going to continue calling the plays. He's lost his head coach. He's been behind an offensive line that has been makeshift gobbledygook, for lack of a better term there. And it's been a rough rookie season for Caleb Williams, and yet you still come out of this season, at least at this point, Courtney, and you're like, I think the Bears found somebody who's Bears proof. This is a good feeling. We've got an answer here. And like when you have those moments, I think that, do you want to disrupt that comfort? Sure.
And that's something that they have to ask themselves.
Yeah, that's the big question heading into this offseason. But if you've got a better answer, sometimes you got to be a little bit uncomfortable for a little while to go out and get a better answer. Let us know you guys' opinions in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts from the press conference. What were your big takeaways? Can't wait to see what Thomas Brown is going to look like on the field this coming Sunday. And he should, I'm not, it feels weird with like an interim head coach in there, but like San Francisco's so dead. Like he should be able to win this game.
It's weird. I mean, like, think of the circumstances. Would we be feeling this way if Matt Eberflus was still here coaching this team? Probably not.
No.
Like, it's just like the clean slate approach for this team right now. is so necessary. Where like even when the Saints fired Dennis Allen and they're in it. I don't know if the game was in Atlanta or if they played. I think they played at home, but like they beat the Saints. They beat the Falcons by 1 point. Like, does that automatically mean like you switch from one coach to another as your head coach, if that's going to like affect things? No, but the energy is tangible. It's different. And players are behind this guy in ways that they just weren't under Matt Eberflus, especially at the end.
I thought it was very interesting, right? Meller brought up, you get a little bit of bump bump from moving Thomas Brown into that head coach position, right? Everybody's going to be behind him. There's probably some excitement in there that Flus is not in the building anymore because they felt he was causing them to lose games. But here's the realistic scenario. A little bit of a bump in 3 games is 3 wins. You were 3 points away. If you get a little bit of a bump versus your 3 divisional teams, you stack 3 wins. It'll be interesting to see if he can provide that bump and if it can stay consistent. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. For Courtney Cronin, it's your boy Pat the Designer back at it again. Again, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be down there talking with you guys as well. Make sure to stay tapped in with everything Courtney has going on. And y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bed down. One love.